We're going to follow the procedures of the Berkshire annual meeting, where we're going to go through all this perfunctory stuff very rapidly. Then we'll stay a long time because some of you have come a long way. Ellen, will you please report the number of shares present and so on?
1,380,746.
All right. Well, I usually talk a little bit before we take the questions. And the essence of what's going on here, of course, is that we have a corporation that was in a branch of the newspaper business. And our branch of the newspaper business, like most newspaper businesses, has gone to hell compared to what it was in its peak years. And almost every other newspaper business is going to hell with no pardon, they're just disappearing. And what we have is this computer software business where we're serving the same customers to some extent, except now they're all over the country, and even some of them outside the country. With this, we were selling software to all these courts and public agencies, whereas before we were giving information to lawyers and other people and publishing public notices. And our software business is of a type where it's a long, tough slog, but we're slogging very well, and we really love the people who are doing it for us. We've got a lot of wonderful people in our software business, the implementers and the computer programmers and the people that deal with the public agencies. And the ethos of the place is very admirable. Everybody's trying to get ahead here by doing the work right and serving the customers right and having a lot of financial wherewithal. Money is never a problem in doing what we're supposed to do. And so it's a pleasure to people like Rick Guerin and myself to watch all these young people doing this. And of course, we're very glad to be able to do it when we should be dead. And a lot of you people came into this because Berkshire was successful and Guerin was successful, and for various odd reasons of history. And most of you are accidentally in the software business, and I am too, because Guerin did it when I wasn't paying much attention. I don't do this kind of venture capital stuff, and he doesn't either, but he did it here. And so if there's anything wrong with what happens in our software business, you're looking at a man who caused it all over here. I'll take credit for any successes. But if there's failure, you're looking at the man here who got us into this. And it is amazing to me, some of the things that are happening in our software business. We just are getting a contract from South Australia. Now, if anybody told me when I was young, the little daily journal company would be automating the courts of South Australia. I mean, I hardly know where it is. Anyway, it's amazing what's happening, and it's a fair amount of fun to watch, probably because we're doing more winning than losing. I've never been able to enjoy losses the way some people do. I would much rather win, and I really like to work with good people instead of the opposite. And we've got a lot of good employees in our software business. We've got a bunch of implementers in Utah who are really good at it, whom we really trust, and whom the customers like. And we got all these computer programmers and so forth around here. And a game of service like that, when it's complicated, what you have to do is minimize your glitches and crawl out of them very rapidly in a way where the customers trust you. And our people are good at that, and they get better and better, and they're trying to get ahead by being good at the service, not by hiring some politician as a consultant. Yeah, some of our competitors do that kind of stuff, but we're trying to slog our way up by doing the work right. When I was a lawyer, there was a saying I always used: the best business getter any lawyer ever has is the work that's already on his desk. And that's the basic ethos of our software business. If we just keep doing it right, I don't think we have to worry about the future. Not that we won't have our down drafts and our failures, but we are actually grinding ahead slowly in that software business. And it's very interesting because Garen and I know practically nothing about it, and Jerry didn't come up as a software engineer, so we're basically doing something that's quite difficult. We're judging people because we don't understand what the people do. I mean, we have, and that's what Andrew Carnegie did. Of course, he didn't know anything about making steel, but he knew a lot about judging whether the people he was trusting were good at making steel. And of course, that's what Berkshire's done, if you stop to think about it. We have a lot of businesses in Berkshire that neither Warren or I could contribute much to, but we've been pretty good at judging which people are capable of running those businesses. But this is pretty extreme here. A little daily journal company going into the computer software business. And it's a long, slow kind of business. RFPs. The first time we contact a customer until we start making money, maybe 5 years. So it's like deciding you'll start prospecting for oil in Borneo or something. And they just keep doing that over and over again. And of course, the money goes out and the effort goes out and starts coming in 5 years from now. I love that kind of stuff. Not when I think we're taking territory. It doesn't look good when we write it off and we don't report wonderful numbers or anything. But if it makes sense in the long term, we just don't give a damn what it looks like over the short term. And we know we've collected a bunch of shareholders that share our ideas. After all, we're running a cult, not a normal company. and I think most of you feel you're willing to wait. I live all my life with people who are into deferred gratification. In fact, most of them will never have any fun. They'll just defer gratification all the way to the end. That's what we do. And it does cause you to get rich. So we're going to have a lot of rich dead people. But, you know, we can excite a lot of envy. A lot of you, when the people walk by your grave and there'll be this nice grave with this nice monument, they'll say, God, what a great grave. I wish I were under it. But at any rate, deferred gratification really does work if what you're interested in doing is running a business that gets better or getting wealthy yourself so that your grave can look nice to outsiders. And, you know, I don't know. Garrett and I have never taken any money out of this company in all these years. We don't take salaries, we don't take director's fees. We're a peculiar example. I wish our example spread more, because I think if you're wealthy and own a big share of a company, and you get to decide what it does and whether it liquidates or whether it keeps going, that's a nice position to be in. And maybe you shouldn't try and grab all the money in addition. And that's my theory of executive compensation, I think. And some of the old-fashioned guys, like Carnegie, never took any salary to speak of. Cornelius Vanderbilt didn't take any. Cornelius Vanderbilt, of course, he owned the whole place, practically. And he would have considered it beneath him. He lived on the dividends like the shareholders did. And so there's a lot of that those old-fashioned ideas here in the Daily Journal Company. I'll first take a bunch of questions about the Daily Journal question, and after that we'll take questions on anything you want to talk about. don't see it very well, so Jerry or somebody, why don't you?
Hi, Brad Gillespie from Chicago. At last year's meeting, you talked about the milestone of getting the LA court system here at Journal Technologies, and I was wondering, in the last year, as it's gone by, what good milestones have happened and what bad things have happened with
Jerry, you take that one. I'll answer it short. It's going fine.
We have 3 case types for the. It's on. It's closer to your mouth.
Closer to your mouth. It's high tech.
There it's on. We have 3 case types for Los Angeles, and one case type went live last April. Another case type will go live this coming July, and a third case type about 10 to 12 months later after that. We have to work with the Los Angeles schedule. After all, they have a lot of people to train, and that becomes a very important factor. Training is critical because if the end users aren't trained properly, virtually everything falls apart. And so that's the schedule. We discussed it this morning, and we meet with the court about 3 miles from here virtually every day. And we have a good team from the court, and I think they're very excited about what they're doing. And that's critical to us, that the court feels good about the system.
One good thing about what we're doing is it's slow and it's agony in the delays between the first customer contact and finally getting into a decent revenue stream. But once you succeed, it's very sticky business. Very sticky business. So, and the fact that it's difficult to do means it's difficult for people to change much. And so if you go slog through all this tough territory we're slogging through, there's a reward out there somewhere, and we're not in a small business. It has way more potential than the original print business we had, giving information about appellate cases to lawyers. It's a big market, and the people have no option but to charge ahead. These courts and district attorneys, public defenders, all these people we're serving, they're overwhelmed without better systems and more software. So it's a huge market. And the fact that it's so awful to grind through means that the people who want easy gratification don't come in. So if it seems slow and painful to you, we kind of like it that way.
Hello. Another Daily Journal question. I'd be curious on your thoughts about, you're slowly grinding through, but it seems like Tyler Technologies is grinding through a lot quicker. They just won Maine, they're in 24 states. And so I was just wondering how you think your competitive position versus Tyler is doing.
Well, Tyler is an extremely aggressive company, and they were bigger, faster, and so on. But I like our ethos of operation better than I like theirs. And if I were buying software, I'd rather buy ours than theirs. So our system is to keep fighting the game, and I wish all the customers I had in life were like Tyler.
Hi, Max Flower from Marina Del Rey. Thanks for your answers so far. I'm a little nervous about the rate of revenue growth going down a little bit, the expenses going up. I appreciate what you're saying about deferred gratification. Any major milestones in the next 3 to 5 years that you think you'd like to hit, or any major customers that you'd like to get that would really help things along?
Well, take your first question. It looks like we're proceeding slowly, but we bought a bunch of contracts, in effect, for money, and we knew that they were going to end, and so we're amortizing the cost of those contracts. But it was an anticipated decline that we got big revenues up front for taking, so we're not declining as much as we're getting ahead. There's a little blip in the figures. Now, the second half of the question was
any major jumps or acquisitions you'd like to make, or customers that you'd like to be part of it?
there aren't any. Every contract that's significant is a major jump, and the business is so big. There are whole states. I mean, this is a huge business, and everybody is just scrambling in the first parts of something that's going to grow bigger and bigger and last and last. And as long as we're doing the work right and so on, why, it's likely to work out right.
Daily Journal runs a lot of Wells Fargo. Can you comment?
Well, of course, Wells Fargo had a glitch. The truth of the matter is they made a business judgment that was wrong. They got so caught up in cross-selling and so forth and having tough incentive systems that they got the incentive systems so aggressive that some people reacted badly and did things they shouldn't, and then they used some misjudgment in reacting to the trouble they got in. I don't think anything's fundamentally wrong for the long pole with Wells Fargo. They made a mistake, and it was an easy mistake to make. And the smartest man I ever knew made a similar mistake. Henry Singleton was the smartest single human being I've ever known in my whole life. And Henry Singleton at Teledyne also had very aggressive incentive systems like Wells Fargo, and his customer in many of the subsidiaries was the government. And of course, it's not that hard to cheat the government. And with his very aggressive incentive systems, 2 or 3 out of 20 subsidiaries cheated the government. So all of a sudden, he's got 3 scandals at once. It wasn't that Henry was trying to cheat the government, it's just that he just got a little aggressive in applying the incentives, and he got blindsided. That can happen to anybody, and I don't regard getting the incentives a little aggressive at Wells Fargo as the mistake. I think the mistake there was that when the bad news came, they didn't recognize it rightly. They made a mistake. But what happens in a tough system like capitalism? You make a mistake like that, and pretty soon you're gone.
This is Randy Vidine from Phoenix, Arizona. I'm a Daily Journal shareholder. This is for Jerry or Charlie. Congratulations for inverting and not doing things wrong in regard to Daily Journal. What about, do you have any insight into the Alameda court system and the problems that Tyler's having over there?
Well, no, but I'm not dissatisfied about it. I don't think I want to criticize Tyler any more than I have. So I think one of our customers, you'll be sad to know, is having some problems with pleasing a customer. You can see the salt tears running down my cheeks.
Got a quick question on your software fees in terms of your revenue. And what portion of that is recurring versus one-time fees?
That is so complicated that I'm not even going to try to answer it. I will just answer in substance. There's a lot that's recurring if we stay in there. You can't look at our financial statements and make very good judgments about what's going to happen. It's the nature of our game that it's confusing. It confuses us a little bit. So we're not holding back on purpose. It's a very complex, confusing system when you got all these RFPs, and it's very complicated.
Any other questions about the business?
So you purchased the building in Logan, but which I believe is used exclusively in the Journal Technologies, but in the accounting it's under the traditional business. I'm wondering why in the segment.
Jerry, I gave you that one. He says, why is Logan somehow in the traditional business? It shouldn't be. He has the theory.
The Daily Journal purchased the building, and they own the building, and Journal Technologies pays rent to the parent company for that, and the amount of rent is not what we would consider material from that perspective. And because it's owned by the Daily Journal, that's how we originally classified it. No real significant reasons. All the expenses are on the Daily Journal's, or on the Journal Technologies books.
That's some quirk of accounting. It doesn't really matter. All right, next.
Next, questions?
Question on incentives. You were explaining at Wells Fargo that you might have been a little too aggressive, but you don't have to have aggressive incentives. I don't know.
Well, how do you know they're aggressive until you try? And they didn't react enough to the bad news fast enough. And of course, that's a very dangerous thing to do. I don't think it impairs the future of Wells Fargo. As a matter of fact, they'll be better for it. You know, one nice thing about doing something dumb is you probably won't do it again.
So this isn't a Daily Journal question, but my question comes from the perspective of someone early in their career who is trying to figure out which of several paths to pursue. Two thoughts that seem helpful for this purpose are, one, figuring out what work you have the possibility of becoming the best at, and two, ascertaining what kind of work would most help society. Do you think these ideas are the right ones to focus on? And if so, how would you go about answering them?
Well, in terms of picking what to do, I want to report to all of you that in my whole life, I've never succeeded much in something I wasn't interested in. So I don't think you're going to succeed if what you're doing all day doesn't interest you. And you've got to find something you're interested in, because it's just too much to expect of human nature that you're going to be very good at something you deeply dislike doing. And so that's one big issue. And of course, you have to play in a game where you've got some unusual talents. You do not want to play, if you're 5'1", you don't want to play basketball against a guy that's 8'3". It's just too hard. And so you got to figure out a game where you have an advantage, and it has to be something you're deeply interested in. Now you get into the ethical side of life. Of course you want to be ethical. On the other hand, you can't be just dreaming how you think the world should be run, and that it's too dirty for you to get near it. You know, like, you can get so consumed by some kind of ideological notion, particularly in a left-wing university, that it's like you think you're handling ethics and what you're doing is not working, and watching the world go by, and maybe smoking a little pot to boot. This is not the Munger system. My hero is Maimonides, and all that philosophy, all that writing, he did after working 10 or 12 hours a day as a practicing physician all his life. He believed in the engaged life. And so I recommend the engaged life. You spend all your time thinking about, you know, what some politician wants this way or that way, and you're sure you know right. You're on the wrong track. You want to do something every day where you're you're coping with the reality. You want to be more like Maimonides and less like Bernie Sanders.
So I have a question on American Express. I have a question on American Express. What increasing the fluidity of payments weaken is or strengthen its value proposition in the long run? As in, like, is American Express value proposition more in terms of payment, or is it more important in terms of service and rewards? And what's the last one?
Well, I'm going to give you an answer that will be very helpful to you, because you're somewhat confused about what the exact future of Wells Fargo will be. American Express, sorry. And I want to tell you, I'm confused too. I think that if you think you understand exactly what's going to happen to payment systems 10 years out, you're probably under some state of delusion. It's very hard to know. So if you're confused, all I can say is welcome to the club. They're doing the best they can. They've got some huge advantages. It's a reasonable bet, but nobody knows. I don't know if IBM is going to sell that much of Watson. I always say I'm agnostic on the subject, and you're talking about the payment system 10 years out, I'm agnostic on that too. I think if you keep trying, do the right thing, and you play the game hard, your chances are better. But I don't think those things are knowable. Think of how fast they change.
Hi, Mr. Munger. Do you think domestic natural gas exploration and production is a good business despite the capital intensity? Thank you.
Well, that's a different subject. I have a different feeling about the energy business than practically anybody else in America. I wish we weren't producing all this natural gas. I would be delighted to have the condensate that's coming out of our shale deposits and natural gas just lie there untapped for decades in the future and pay extra to a bunch of Arabs to use up their oil. But that's, nobody else in America seems to feel my way. But I'm into deferred gratification. The oil and gas is not going away, and I think it's just as important as the topsoil of Iowa. And if any of you said, oh goody, I found a way to make money, we'll ship all our topsoil from Iowa to Greenland, I wouldn't think that was a very good idea. And so I don't think hastening to use up all our oil and gas is a good idea. But I'm practically the only one in the country that feels that way. There's not enough deferred gratification in it to please me. But I don't see any advantage. I regard our oil and gas reserves just as chemical feedstocks. They're essential in civilization. Leave aside their energy content. I'd be delighted to use them up more slowly. By the way, I'm sure I'm right, and the other 99% of the people are wrong. But no, I don't know. The oil and gas business is very peculiar. The people who succeed in most other businesses are doing way more physical volume than they did in the past. But a place like Exxon, you know, the physical volume goes by 2/3. It's just that the price of oil goes up faster than the physical volume goes down. That is a very peculiar way to make money. And it may well continue, but it's confusing. We're not used to it.
Mr. Munger?
Yeah.
As an 18-year-old interested in many disciplines, I was wondering how you can thrive as a polymath in a world that celebrates specialization.
Well, that's a good question. I don't think operating over many disciplines, as I do, is a good idea for most people. I think it's fun, that's why I've done it. And I'm better at it than most people would be. And I don't think I'm good at being the very best at handling differential equations. So it's been a wonderful path for me, but I think the correct path for everybody else is to specialize and get very good at something that society rewards and they get very efficient at doing. But even if you do that, I think you should spend 10 or 20% of your time into trying to know all the big ideas and all the other disciplines. Otherwise, I use the same phrase over and over again. Otherwise, you're like a one-legged man in an ass-kicking contest. This is not going to work very well. You have to know the big ideas in all the disciplines to be safe if you have a life lived outside a cave. But no, I think you don't want to neglect your business as a dentist to think great thoughts about Proust.
Mr. Munger, a question for you on the Lollapalooza effects. What are you observing now in your study of current events that's causing you concern, and how can one use that interdisciplinary approach to spot them in advance? Thank you.
Well, I coined that term, the Lollapalooza effect, because when I realized I didn't know any psychology and that was a mistake on my part, I bought the 3 main textbooks for introductory psychology, and I read through them. And of course, being Charlie Munger, I decided that the psychologists were doing it all wrong and I could do it better. And one of the ideas I came up with, which wasn't in any of the books, was that the Lollapalooza effects came when 3 or 4 of these tendencies were operating at once in the same situation. I could see that it wasn't linear. You got Lollapalooza effects, but the psychology people couldn't do experiments that were 4 or 5 things were happening at once because it got too complicated for them, and they couldn't publish. So they were ignoring the most important thing in their own profession. And of course, the other thing that was important was to synthesize psychology with all else. The trouble with the psychology profession is they don't know anything about all else. And you can't synthesize one thing you know with something you don't if you don't know the other thing. So that's why I came up with that Lollapalooza stuff. And by the way, I've been lonely ever since. I'm not getting any ground. I'm not taking any ground there. And by the way, I'm totally right.
Charlie, I'm Paul Smith from Los Altos, California. My question relates to a comment you made some years ago about Warren Buffett. I think you said that he has become a significantly better investor since he turned 65, which I found a remarkable comment. I was wondering if you could share information about that maybe we haven't heard before. I know you've commented that he's a learning machine, and we all know that the aversion to retail that came out of the Diversified episode and so on. Just to be interested, is there something that's changed about his risk assessment or his horizons, or any color there would be fantastic. Thank you.
Well, if you're in a game and you're passionate about learning more all the time and getting better and honing your own skills a little more, et cetera, of course you do better over time. And some people are better at that than others. And it's amazing what Warren has done. Berkshire would be a very modest company now if Warren never learned anything. He never would have given anything back. I mean, any territory he took he was gonna hold it. But what really happened was we went out into new fields like buying whole businesses and we bought into things like ISCAR that Warren never would have bought when he was young. Ben Graham would never have bought ISCAR. We paid it, 5 times book or something for ISCAR. And it wasn't in the Graham play. And Warren, who learned under Graham, he learned better over time. And I've learned better. The nice thing about the game we're in is that you can keep learning. And we're still doing it. Imagine, we're in the press this CNBC for all of a sudden airline stocks. What have we said about the airline business? We thought it was a joke it was such a terrible business. And now if you put all those stocks together, we own one minor airline. By the way, it's the total catechism. We did the same thing on railroads. We said the railroads are no damn good, too many of them, truck competition. And we were right, it was a terrible business for about 80 years. But finally they got onto 4 big railroads and it was a better business. And something similar is happening in the airline business. On the other hand, this very morning, I sat down in my library with my daughter-in-law, and she took a round-trip ticket to Europe, including taxes. It was like $400 or $500. And we're buying into the airline business? Now, it may work out to be a good idea for the same reason that our railroad business turned out to be a good idea. But there's some chance that it might not. In the old days, I frequently talk to Warren about the old days, and for years and years and years, what we did was shoot fish in a barrel. But it was so easy that we didn't want to shoot at the fish while they were moving. So we waited until they slowed down, and then we shot at them with a shotgun. And it was just that easy. And it's gotten harder and harder and harder. And now we get little edges before we had total cinches. And it isn't any less interesting. And we do not make the same returns we made when we could run around and pick this low-hanging fruit off trees that offered a lot of it. So now we go into things. We bought the Exxon position. You know why Warren bought Exxon? As a cash substitute. He would never have done that in the old days. We had a lot of cash, and we thought Exxon was better than cash over the short term. That's a different kind of thinking from the way Warren came up. He's changed. And I think he's changed when he buys airlines, and he's changed when he buys Apple. Think of the hooting we've done over the years about high tech. We just don't understand it. It's not our competency. The worst business in the world is airlines. And what do we appear in the press with? Apple and a bunch of airlines. I don't think we've gone crazy. I think the answer is we're adapting reasonably to a business that's gotten very much more difficult. And I don't think we have a cinch in either of those positions. I think we have the odds a little bit in our favor. And if that's the best advantage we can get, we'll just have to live on the advantage we can get. I used to say you have to marry the best person that will have you. And I'm afraid that's a rule of life, and you have to get by in life with the best advantage you can get. And things have gotten so difficult in the investment world that we have to be satisfied with the type of advantage that we didn't used to get. On the other hand, the thing that caused it to be so difficult was we got so enormously rich. And that's not a bad trade-off.
Mr. Munger, at last year's meeting you said Donald Trump was not morally qualified to be president, and now that he is president, do you still agree with that, or do you think he's qualified in any capacity?
Well, I've gotten more mellow. I always try and think about the good as long with what's not good. And I think some of this stuff where they're re-examining options about the whole tax system of the country, I think that's a very constructive thing. And when Donald Trump says he wouldn't touch Social Security, when a lot of highfalutin Republicans have all kinds of schemes for rising Social Security, I'm with Donald Trump. If I were running the world, I'd have his exact attitude about Social Security. I wouldn't touch it. So he's not wrong on everything, and just because he isn't like us, roll with it. There's a little danger. What the hell? You're not going to live forever anyway.
Hi, Charlie. I was wondering what was the most meaningful thing that you did with your life?
Well, I think the family and children is the most meaningful thing that most people do with their life. And I've been reasonably fortunate. I don't think I'm a perfect husband, and I'm lucky to have had as much felicity as I got. And I always needed a certain amount of toleration from the fair sex. I started wrong, and I never completely fixed myself. I should tell this group about, you come here as a cult to talk to a cult leader. I want to take you back in history. You'll see what an inferior person you were. You're now trusting. When I was a freshman in Omaha Central High, there was a friend of the family near my age, and she had done off to summer camp in the year before, and she met a blonde goddess, a voluptuous 13-year-old, and I was a skinny, underdeveloped, whatever, and so forth. You got to take my blonde goddess to this dance. And so I wanted to impress this blonde goddess. And so I pretended to smoke, which I didn't. And she was wearing a net dress, and I set her on fire. Well, I was quick-witted, and I threw Coca-Cola all over her. At due time, the fire was out, and that's the last I saw of the blonde goddess. And then I said, well, I got to make more time with the girls. And I wanted to get a letter in Omaha Central High. Of course, I was no good at any sport. So I went down to the rifle range and learned they gave letters in rifle shooting. And I was so skinny that I could shoot 100 every time in the sitting position by sitting cross-legged and putting one elbow on each foot. Try it, you'll break your neck. But I could shoot 100 every time, so I was a good rifle shooter. They gave me a letter. But I was so skinny and short and underdeveloped that it went from one armpit to the other. And I walked down the hallway trying to impress the girls, and they would turn their head. But what they said was, how did a little skinny, unattractive little run like that get a letter? And then I had another experience. There was a girl who had a name I still remember, Zibby Brewington. She was a senior, and a very popular senior. And I was a nerd sophomore. And somehow she agreed to go with me to a party in one of the outbuildings of the Omaha Country Club. Perhaps because she liked one of my friends who was a big strapping fellow. And so I took Zibby for this party in my 1934 Ford, and it sleeted and got rainy and so forth. I managed to stick the Ford in the mud, and I couldn't get out of it. Zibby and I had to walk for several miles through sleet and mud. That was the last I ever saw of Zibby Brewington. And then my car stayed in the mud, and I neglected to put in antifreeze, and the temperature went way down suddenly, and the block broke. And of course it was too expensive to fix the car. I lost my car, and my father wouldn't buy a new one because he said, why should I buy a new car for a guy who's dumb enough not to put antifreeze in? This is the person you're coming for miles to see. And so I didn't get a new car. And my life was just one long litany of mistakes and failure. And it went on and on and on. And politics, I ran to be the president of the DSIC in grade school, the Dundee School Improvement Association. I had the most popular boy in the school as my campaign manager. I came in second by miles. I was a total failure in politics. There's hardly anything I succeeded at. Now, I tell you all this because I know a nerd when I see one, and there are a lot of nerds here. Who can tell stories like mine, and I want you to feel it's not hopeless. Just keep trying.
Hello, Mr. Munger.
Oh, yeah. Garen wants me to repeat the story of Max Planck. And according to this story, Max Planck, when he won the Nobel Prize, was invited to run around Germany giving lectures. And a chauffeur drove him. And after he'd given the lecture about 20 times, the chauffeur had memorized it. And he said, you know, says Professor Planck, it's so boring. why don't you just sit in the audience and I, the chauffeur, will give your talk. And so the chauffeur got up and gave Max Planck's talk on physics, and some professors asked some terrible question. And the chauffeur said, well, he says, I'm surprised that in an advanced city like Munich, people are asking elementary questions like that. He says, I'm going to ask my chauffeur to answer that one. Well, I'm telling jokes. I might tell one of my favorite stories about a plane that's flying over the Mediterranean. And the pilot's voice comes on. He says, a terrible thing has happened. We're losing both engines. We're going to have to land in the Mediterranean. And he says, the plane will stay afloat for a very short time, and we'll be able to open the door just long enough so that everybody can get out. And we have to do this in an orderly fashion. He says, everybody who can swim, go to the right wing and just stand there. And everybody who can't swim, go to the left wing and just stand there. And he says, those of you on the right wing, you'll find a little island in the direction of the sun. It's 2 miles off, and as the plane goes under, just swim over to the island, you'll be fine. And for those of you on the left wing, he says, I want to thank you for flying Air Italian.
Hello, Mr. Munger. William Andresian, student at USC. Wonderful stories. With regard to the proliferation of index funds, do you think that there may be issues of liquidity anytime we go through another large crisis? And then do you think that that will create large discrepancies between the price of the index fund and the values of the securities underneath?
Well, the index funds of the S&P is like 75% of the market. So I don't think the exact problem you're talking about is going to be a big problem if you're talking about the SEP index. But is there a point where index funds theoretically can't work? Of course. If everybody bought nothing but index funds, the whole world wouldn't work as people expect. There's also the problem, one of the reasons you buy a big index, like the S&P, is because if you buy a small index and it gets popular, it's a self-defeating situation. When the Nifty 50 were the rage, JP Morgan talked everybody into buying just 50 stocks. And they didn't care what the price was, they just bought those 50 stocks. And of course, in due time, their own buying forced those 50 stocks up to 60 times earnings, whereupon it broke and everything went down by about 2/3 quite fast. In other words, if you get too much faddishness in one sector or in one narrow index, of course you can get catastrophic changes like they had with the Nifty 50 in that former era. I don't see that happening when the index is 3/4 of the whole market. The problem is the whole thing can't work perfectly forever, but it'll work for a long time. The indexes have caused just absolute agony among intelligent investment professionals because basically 95% of the people have almost no chance of beating it over time. And yet a lot of the people expect that if they have some money, they can hire somebody who will let them beat the indexes. And of course, the honest, sensible people know they're selling something they can't quite deliver. And that has to be agony. Most people handle that with denial. They think it'll be better next year, or they just don't want to think about it. And I understand that. I don't really think about my own death either. But it's a terrible problem, beating those indexes. And it's a problem that investment professionals didn't happen in the past. And what's happening, of course, is that the prices for managing really big sums of money are going down, 20 basis points and so on. The people who rose in investment management didn't do it by getting paid 20 basis points. But that's where we're going, I think, in terms of people who manage big portfolios of say, American equities and the equivalent of the S&P. So it's a huge, huge problem. And it makes your generation of money managers have way more difficulties than, and it causes a lot of worry and fretfulness, and I think the people who are worried and fretful are absolutely right. I would hate to manage $1 trillion in the big stocks and try and beat the indexes. I don't think I could do it. In fact, if you look at Berkshire, take out 100 decisions, which is like 2 a year. The success of Berkshire came from 2 decisions a year over 50 years. We're hardly great. We may have beaten the indexes, but we didn't do it by having big portfolios of securities and having subdivisions managing the drugs and subdivisions. And so, no, the indexes are a hell of a problem for you people. But, you know, why shouldn't life be hard? It's what had to happen, what's happened now. If you take these people doing some of those early trading by computer algorithms that worked, then somebody else would come into the same thing with the same algorithm and play the same game, and of course the returns went down. Well, that's what's happening in the whole field. Is the returns you're really going to get are being pushed down by the progress of the suns.
Thank you, Mr. Munger. My name is Nick Henderson. I'm from Oakland, California. I have 2 questions for you. My first question is, what books or experience were the most formative to you in your early career? And the second question is, where and how do you tell your most ambitious grandchildren to look for business opportunities?
To look for what?
Business opportunities.
I didn't get the last word.
Business opportunities.
Well, I don't spend any time telling my grandchildren what business opportunities to look for. You know, I don't have that much hope. I'm going to have trouble getting my grandchildren to work at all. Anyway, I don't think there is an easy way to handle the problem of doing better and better with finances. Obviously, if you're glued together and honorable and get up every morning and keep doing it and keep learning every day, and you are willing to go in for a lot of deferred gratification all your life, you're going to succeed. It may not be as much as you want, but you're going to succeed. And so the main thing is to just keep in there and be glued together and get rid of your stupidities as fast as you can, and avoid the bad people as much as you can, and you'll do reasonably well. But try teaching that to your grandchildren. I think the only way you got a chance is sort of by example. So if you want to improve your grandchildren, the best way is to fix yourself. Books. You cultists send me so many books that I can scarcely walk into my own library. And so I'm reading so many now, because I never throw one away, I at least skim. And so I've gotten sort of like a kaleidoscope with the books. I just read this new book by Thorpe, the guy who beat the dealer in Las Vegas. And then he did computer algorithm trading. And I really liked the book. For one thing, the guy had a very good marriage, and he seemed grateful for it, and it was touching. For another, he's a very smart man. He was a mathematician using a high IQ to A, beat the dealer in Las Vegas and so forth, and then B, use these computer algorithms to do this massive trading. And I found it very interesting, and since some of you people are nerds, and maybe like a buried love story, Thorpe's new book. It's an interesting thing to do, to beat the dealer in Las Vegas. You know, they were wearing disguises and so on. And Peter Kaufman told me a story about somebody he knows. Did the same thing as Thorpe did, except he did it more extreme. He wore disguises and so forth. He won $4 million, I think, in the casinos. You know, and that was hard to do because the casinos don't like playing against people who might win. And then maybe it was 40 million, whatever it was. Then he went to the stock market, where he made $4 billion. Again, clever algorithms, and you know, these people are mathematically gifted, and they sifted. So it's still going on, and I don't think many of you are going to do it. There can't be many people who are mathematically gifted enough and manipulate statistics and everything else so well that they find little algorithms that will make them $4 billion. But there are a few, and so some of them started just like Thorpe. So Thorpe's book is interesting, and I recommend it to you.
Hello, Mr. Munger. My name is Mithun. I am a student at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. Thank you for being such a great teacher. You have expressed your appreciation for the idea of filial piety, the Confucian idea. In this generation, how can we fulfill our filial duties?
I didn't quite catch.
How can we, so in my generation, I at least will be staying far away from my parents. So how can I fulfill my filial duties the best way as you see it? Filial?
Oh, filial piety.
Sorry.
Well, of course, that's I like filial piety, you know. They worship old men, rich old men, and that is my kind of a system. But I think the idea of caring about your ancestors and caring about the traditions, I think all that stuff is a big part of what's desirable. And I really admire the Confucians for that notion that it's not a game that's played just in one life. It's a game where you're handing the baton off and you're accepting the baton from your predecessor. So if filial piety is your game, why, I think it's a very good thing. Think of how rootless we'd all be if we had no families at all, no predecessors, no descendants. It would be a very different life. And think what we owe to the people that figured out things in the past that make our civilization work. So I'm all for filial piety and its close cousins.
Good morning, Mr. Munger. Jesse Coltis from New York. You said that any year in which you don't destroy one of your best loved ideas is a wasted year. It's well known that you helped coax Warren towards quality, which was a difficult transition for him. I was wondering if you could speak to the hardest idea that you've ever destroyed.
Well, I've done so many dumb things that I'm very busy destroying bad ideas because I keep having them. And so it's hard for me to just single out one from such a multitude. But I actually like it when I destroy a bad idea because I think I'm on the right. I think it's my duty to destroy old ideas. I know so many people whose main problem of life is that the old ideas displace the entry of new ideas that are better. That is the absolute standard outcome in life. There's an old German folk saying that describes it. He says, "We're too soon old and we're too late smart." That's everybody's problem. And the reason we're too late smart is the stupid ideas we already have, we can't get rid of. Now, it's a good thing that we have that problem. In marriage, that may be good for the stability of marriage, that we stick with our old ideas. But in most fields, you want to get rid of your old ideas. And it's a good habit. And And it gives you a big advantage in the competitive game of life since other people are so very bad at it. What happens is, as you spout ideas out, what you're doing is you're pounding them in. And so you get these ideas, and then you start agitating and saying them and so forth. And of course, the person you're really convincing is you who already have the ideas. You're just pounding them in harder and harder. One of the reasons I don't spend much time telling the world what I think about how the Federal Reserve System should behave and so forth is I know that I'm just pounding the ideas into my own head when I think I'm telling other people how to run things. So I think you have to have mental habits that I don't like it when the young people get violently convinced on every damn cause or something. I think they know everything. Some 17-year-old wants to tell the whole world what should be done about abortion or foreign policy in the Middle East or something. All he's doing when he or she spouts about what he deeply believes is pounding the ideas he already has in, which is a very dumb idea when you're just starting and have a lot to learn. So it's very important, that habit of getting rid of the dumb ideas. And one of the things I do is pat myself on the back every time I get rid of a dumb idea. And you can say, look, can you really reinforce your own good behavior? Yeah, you can. If other people won't praise you, you can praise yourself. I have a big system of patting myself on the back. Every time I get rid of a much beloved idea, I pat myself on the back, sometimes several times. And I recommend this same mental habit to all of you. The price we pay for being able to accept a new idea is just awesomely large. Indeed, a lot of people die because they can get a new idea through their head.
Hello, Charlie. My name is Donovan Schaefer. I'm over here to your right. In the pink. All right. I used to work as a petroleum engineer, and from my experience of that, and I was kind of in it through a lot of the whole shale stuff that's happened, and my perception is that as an industry itself, it just continuously has gotten more and more complex and more technical, and that as the economy in general expands and you have more division of labor and specialization, it seems to me that it'll be very hard, like it could be a challenge for investors unless there is some more specialization or something. I guess my question is, as it gets more, do you think that capital allocators are going to need to become more specialized going forward?
Well, you petroleum people, of course, have to get more specialized because the oil is harder to get and you have to learn new tricks to get it. And so you're totally right. Generally, specialization is the way to go for most people. It's just I'm an example of something different. And it's awkward for me because, but I don't want to encourage people to try to do it the way I did because I don't think it'll work for most people. I think the basic ideas of being rational and disciplined and deferring gratification, those will work. But if you want to get rich the way I did, by learning a little bit about a hell of a lot, I don't recommend it to others. Now, I've got a story there that I tell. A young man comes to see Mozart. He says, I want to compose symphonies. And Mozart says, you're too young to compose symphonies. And he says, he's 20 years old. He says, but you were composing symphonies, you were 10 years old. And Mozart says, yeah. He says, but I wasn't running around asking other people how to do it. And I think there's some of that in it. I don't think I'm a good example to the young. I don't want to encourage people to follow my particular path. I like all the general precepts, but I would not, if you're a proctologist, and I want a proctologist, I do not want a proctologist that knows Schopenhauer or astrophysics. You know, I want a man who's specialized. That's where the market is. You should never forget that. On the other hand, I don't think there's much of a life if all you did was proctology.
Hi, Bill Chen from New York City. This question is for Charlie. Warren and you are known for saying that if you work with a small sum of capital, namely I think being $10 million, Warren had probably said that he could guarantee that he could compound that at 50% a year. So my question is, can you provide some examples? And I would kindly ask you to provide as many examples as possible and be as specific as possible. Thank you.
Well, and then I hear somebody that really wants to get rich at a rapid rate with specifics. That is not what we try and do here. We want to leave some mystery so that you can amuse yourself finding your own way. You know, the good ideas that I have had in my life are quite few. But the lesson I can give you is a few is all you need, and don't be disappointed. And when you find the few, of course, you've got to act aggressively. That's the Munger system. And I learned that indirectly from a man I never met, which was my mother's maternal grandfather. He was a pioneer, and he came out to Iowa and fought in the Black Hawk Wars and so on. And eventually, after enormous hardship, he was the richest man in town, and he owned the bank, and so on. And as he sat there in his old age, when my mother knew him because she'd go to Algona, Iowa, where he lived, and had the big house in the middle of the town, iron fence, capacious lawns, big barns. And what Grandpa Ingham used to tell her is, there's just a few opportunities you get in the whole life. This guy took over Iowa when the land was, the black topsoil of Iowa was cheap. But he didn't get that many opportunities. It was just a few that enabled him to become prosperous. He bought a few farms every time there was a panic, you know, and he leased them to thrifty Germans. He couldn't lose money leasing a farm to a German in Iowa. But he only did a few things. And I'm afraid you're not going to find a million wonderful ideas. These people, the computer algorithms do it, but they have a computer that's sifting the whole world. It's like placer mining. And of course, every niche they're in, if somebody else comes in, the niche starts leaching away. And I don't think it's that honorable way to make a living, by the way. I would rather make my money in some other way than outsmarting the trading system, so I have a little computer algorithm that just leaches a little out of everybody's trade. I always say that those people have all the social utility of a bunch of rats in a granary. It's not that great a way to make money. I would say that if you make your money that way, you should be very charitable with it, because you've got a lot to atone for. and so I don't think it's an ambition we should encourage. And the rest of us who aren't just leeching a little off the top because we're great at computer science, and that's what this room is full of. And if you're not finding it harder now, you don't understand it. That's my lesson. Yeah. No.
Hi, Mr. Munger. My name is Camden Sher, and I would like to know what's your favorite industry and why it's your favorite industry.
I didn't quite follow that.
I would like to know what's your favorite industry and why it's your favorite industry.
My favorite industry? Well, my favorite industry is taking care of my own affairs. and it's fun, it's creative, and it's the job that life has given me, and I think you should do the job well that life gives you. And a lot of the places where the industry is doing a great job for the world, it's very hard to make money out of it because these wild enthusiasms come into it. So I don't have a favorite industry.
Charlie, a few years ago you were bang on in identifying the monkey business at Valiant.
Is there any current monkey business in corporate America that worries you?
Well, the answer is yes, but not as extreme as Valiant. That was really something. That was really something. I probably shouldn't have done that. But you people come so far, and since you're cult members, you like being here, and I feel an obligation to tell you something sort of interesting, and I just strayed into Valiant that year. And it was really pretty disgusting. The interesting thing is how many high-grade people that took in. It really, and it was too good to be true. It was a lot wrong with Valiant, and it was so aggressive, and it was drugs people needed. It was just take the difference between Valiant and the Daily Journal Company. And the foreclosure boom came. We had 80% of the foreclosure business in our area. Well, it's a big area, Southern California, and Northern California too. It would have been very easy for us to raise the prices and make, I don't know, 15 million more or something like that. All these people were losing their houses. A lot of them perfectly decent people. The idea that right in the middle of that we'd just make all the money we could, which some of our competitors did, by the way, we just didn't do it. I don't think capitalism requires that you make all the money that you can. I think there are times when you should be satisfied with less based on just ideas of decency. And at Valiant, they just looked at it a game like chess. They didn't think about any human consequence. They didn't think about anything but getting what they wanted, which was money and glory. And they just stepped way over the line. And of course, in the end, they were cheating. But I don't have a new one. I don't have a business. I got a lot of publicity out of that Valiant thing. I'm not looking for. I don't want this room to have twice as many people next year. And I don't want me not to be here either.
Mr. Munger, I'm Tim Medley. Thank you for your advice over the past 30 years. My question relates to a talk you gave to foundation financial officers in 1998 here in California. And in that talk, you were critical of the complexity and the expense of many foundation portfolios. And you said specifically, an institution with almost all wealth invested long-term in just 3 fine domestic corporations is securely rich. And you gave us an example of the Woodward Foundation and Coca-Cola. So if you had a foundation today with, let's say, $1 billion, would you be comfortable with it being invested in just 3 stocks?
Well, let's take the foundation. I'll change your question around so I want to answer it. Am I comfortable with a non-diversified portfolio? Of course I'm. If you take the Mungers, I care about the Mungers. The Mungers have 3 stocks. We got a block of Berkshire, we got a block of Costco, we have a block of Lilu's fund, and the rest is dribs and grabs. So am I comfortable? Am I securely rich? You're damn right I am. And could other people be just as comfortable as I am if they didn't have a vast portfolio with a lot of names in it, many of whom neither they nor their advisors understand? Of course they'd be better off if they did what I did. But and is 3 stocks enough? What are the chances that Costco is going to fail? What are the chances that Berkshire Hathaway is going to fail? What are the chances that Lilu's portfolio in China is going to fail? The chances of any one of those things happening are almost 0. And the chance that all 3 of them are going to fail. Of course it's going to. That's one of the good ideas I had when I was young. When I started investing my little piddly savings as a lawyer, I tried to figure out how much diversification I would need if I had a 10% advantage every year over stocks generally. I just worked it out. I didn't have any formula. I just worked it out of my high school algebra. And I realized that if I was going to be there for 30 or 40 years, I'd be about 99% sure to do just fine if I never owned more than 3 stocks. And my average holding period was 3 or 4 years. And once I'd done that with my little pencil, I never a moment believed this balderdash they teach about wide diversification. And diversification is a rule of who don't know anything. Warren calls them know-nothing investors. If you're a know-nothing investor, of course you should own the average. But if you're not if you're actually capable of figuring out something that'll work better, you're just hurting yourselves for looking for 50 when 3 will suffice. Hell, 1 will suffice if you do it right. 1. If you have 1 cinch, what else do you need in life? And so the whole idea of that the know-something investor needs a lot of diversification. To think that we're paying these professors to teach this crap to our young. And that people think they should be paid by telling us to diversify. Where it's right, it's an idiot decision. And where it's wrong, you shouldn't be teaching what's wrong. So it's what's going on in corporate finance teaching is that people are getting paid for dispensing balderdash. And since I never believed it, it was a great help to me. It helps if you're out in the market and the other people are believing balderdash and you know what the hell's going on. It's a big help. But so, of course you don't want a lot. If your Uncle Horace, who has no children, has an immense business which is immensely secure and powerful, and he's going to leave it all to you if you come to work in the business, you don't need any diversification. You don't need any corporate finance professors. You should go to work for Uncle Horace. It's a cinch. You don't only need 1 cinch. And sometimes the market gives you the equivalent of an Uncle Horace. And when it does, step up to the pie cart with a big pan. Pie carts like that don't come very often. When they do, you have to have the gumption and the determination to seize the opportunity shrewdly. I was lucky. Imagine learning that from your dead great-grandfather at a very young age. But I spent my whole life with dead people. I really like it. They're so much better than many of the people I'm with here on Earth. All the dead people in the world, you can learn a lot from them. And they're very convenient to reach. Reach out a book and so there's problems of transportation. And so I really recommend making friends among the eminent dead, which of course I did very early. That's been enormously helpful. Some of you wouldn't have helped me, but Adam Smith really did.
Good morning, Mr. Munger, back here.
Yeah.
My question is about the Irish economy and Irish banking. I know that Berkshire Hathaway was a shareholder in Irish banks pre-2008, and I'm wondering if you could comment on how the Irish economy and Irish banking system proceeds with the UK not being part of the European Union going forward.
Well, that of course was a mistake. And it was a mistake that we shouldn't have made, because both Warren and I know that you can't really trust figures put out by the banking industry. And that people who run banks are subject to enormous temptations that lead them astray, because it's easy to make a bank report more earnings by a thing that any idiot could do, which is make it a little more gamey. And of course that's dangerous, and yet the temptations are very great. So we shouldn't have made that mistake, but we did. And that's a good lesson too, that even if you're really good at something, you will occasionally drift into a dumb mistake. And now that's the question about the bank. They went crazy in Ireland, the bankers. And we went crazy when we trusted their damn statements. And it was a mistake. Now what Ireland has done is very smart in reducing all these taxes. Now they have English-speaking people with practically no taxes. And there's a fair amount of charm and so forth in Ireland. It's not like it's a terrible place to be. And they just sucked in half the world into Ireland, where they got these. Gates went there very early with Microsoft and so on. And they took a place that was really a backward place that had sort of an internal civil war for 60 or 70 years and bad opportunities, and they really brought in a lot of prosperity. And they did that by this competitive lowering of taxes and so on. So it worked for Ireland. So I think Ireland deserves a lot of credit for the way they advanced their country. And of course, we're going to have a thing where all the countries keep trying to reduce the taxes to suck in the foreign. Of course, it won't work for everybody, but it did work for Ireland. So I think Ireland deserves a lot of credit. And of course, they've recovered pretty well from a really major collapse. The Irish are like the Scottish. I always think that those Gaelics are pretty unusual people. And I'm very glad that I had a Scotch-Irish great-grandmother.
Charlie, on your right. My name is Parth Chaudhary. I'm from India. I just want to thank you first and foremost for being such an amazing teacher to me and all the investors around the world. My question is in regards to Lee Kuan Yew, and you've on several occasions spoken about the economic miracle that is Singapore and then how it was transferred on by Deng Xiaoping to China. What are your thoughts about India that's going through a similar change with the Prime Minister who also idolizes these people and wants to create a similar sort of situation? I'd like your thoughts on that.
Well, that's a very intelligent question. And I'm not saying all the other questions weren't. And I regard Lee Kuan Yew may have been the best nation builder that ever lived. He took over an malarial swamp with no assets, no natural resources, no nothing, surrounded by a bunch of Muslims who hated him. In fact, he was being spat out by the Muslim country. They didn't want a bunch of damn Chinese in their country. That's how Singapore was formed as a country. The Muslims spat it out. And so here he is, no assets, no money, no nothing. People are dying of malaria, lots of corruption, and he creates in a very short time, by historical standards, modern Singapore. It was huge success. It was such a success, there's no other precedent in the history of the world that is any stronger. Now, China's more important because they're more Chinese, but you can give Lee Kuan Yew a lot of the credit for creating modern China, because those pragmatic communist leaders, they saw a bunch of Chinese that were rich when they were poor, and they said, "The hell with this." Remember, the old communist said, "I don't care whether the cat is black or white, I care whether it catches mice." And he wanted some of the success that Singapore got, and he copied the playbook. So I think the communist leadership that copied Lee Kuan Yew was right. I think Lee Kuan Yew was right. And of course, I have two busts of somebody else in my house. One is Benjamin Franklin, and the other is Lee Kuan Yew. So that's what I think of it. So I think now you turn to India. And I would say I'd rather work with a bunch of Chinese than I would Indian civilization, mired down, caste system, overpopulation, assimilating the worst stupidities of the democratic system, which, by the way, Lee Kuan Yew avoided. It's hard to get anything done in India, and the bribes are just awful. So all I can say is it's not going to be easy for India to follow the example of Lee Kuan Yew. I think India will move ahead, but it is so defective as a get-ahead in place. The Indians I know are fabulous people. They're just as talented as the Chinese, the Indian populace. But the system and the poverty and the corruption and the crazy democratic thing where you let anybody who screams stop all progress, it mires India with problems Lee Kuan Yew didn't have. And I don't think those Indian problems are all easy to fix. Let me give you an example. The Korean steel company, POSCO, invented a new way of creating steel out of lousy iron ore and lousy coal. There's some province in India that has lots of lousy iron ore and lots of lousy coal, which there's not much use for. And this one process would take their lousy iron ore and the coal and make a lot of steel. And they got a lot of cheap labor. So POSCO and India were made for each other. And they made a deal with this province to get together and use the POSCO know-how and the Indian lousy iron ore and lousy coal. And 8 or 9 or 10 years later, with everybody screaming and objecting and farmers lying down on the road or whatever was going on, they canceled the whole thing. In China, they just would have done it. Lee Kuan Yew would have done it in Malaysia. India is grossly defective because they've taken the worst aspects of our culture, allowing a bunch of idiots to scream and stop everything, and they copied it. And so they've taken the worst aspects of democracy, and then they forged their own chains and put them on themselves. So, no, I do not like the prospects of India compared to the prospects of and I don't think that India is going to do as well as Lee Kuan Yew.
Hi, my name is Dom, and I'd like to ask a question about the fallout or loss. In 73, your investment firm with Mr. Wheeler lost over 30%, and again in 74. So that's over half in 2 years. So what happened? And have you been doing differently since then?
Well, somebody restate that for me, because I don't hear as well as I used to.
So what happened in 73 and 74 when your investment firm lost over half?
Oh, that's very simple. That is very easy. And that's a good lesson. That's a good question. What happened is the value of my partnership, where I was running, went down by 50% in 1 year. And now the market went down 40% or something. It was a once in 30-year recession. I mean, monopoly newspapers were selling at 4 times earnings. And at the bottom tick, I was down from the peak 50%. You're right about that. And that has happened to me 3 times in my Berkshire stock. So I regard it as a part of manhood that you're going to be in this game for the long pull, which is the way to do it. You better be able to handle a 50% decline without fussing too much about it. And so my lesson to all of you is conduct your life so that you can handle a 50% decline with aplomb and grace. Don't try to avoid it. It will come. In fact, I would say if it doesn't come, you're not being aggressive enough.
Good morning, Mr. Munger. Thank you for having us, and thank you for your office employees for tolerating many more people in here than normal. My question relates to your...
I think it's their last chance.
We hope not. My question relates to your paper on the biases of psychology of human misjudgment. You spoke about choosing great people earlier, and I'm curious, how do you evaluate, handle, and manage people knowing they might exhibit or suffer from biases you are not, and how have you and Mr. Buffett become such fine judges of character, not just someone's skills and abilities?
Well, I think partly we look smart because we pick such wonderful people to be our partners and our associates, even our employees, and that's gone on right here. Jerry Sullivan is not normal. He looks normal, but he's a damn freak. Jerry does things across 2 or 3 disciplines that are almost beyond human, and he's always been that way. By the way, he's just another Midwesterner. He just come out of the soil back there. And so we've been very lucky to have these wonderful people. And I wish, I'm not quite sure. I think one thing we've done that's helped us to get wonderful people, I always say the best way to get a good spouse is to deserve one. And the best way to get a good partner is to be a good partner yourself. And I think that Warren and I have both been good at that. But whatever the reason, we had these marvelous partners. And they make us look a lot better than we are. You wouldn't even be here if Jerry Sullivan weren't here. We did not have a number 2 choice to run the Daily Journal. And by the way, it happens to me all the time. We have an executive search or something, and there's the number 1 and number 2 is like going off a cliff. And we need 1, but there aren't 3 good ones to pick, but they're all good and one's a little better. Every executive search I have, seems to me there's one guy that's fine and everybody else is a pygmy. And I think that's kind of a way of, I think the good people are hard to find. And people like Warren and I have had wonderful people to work with all our lives and time after time. That's one of the reasons Warren says he tap danced too. Well, you tap too if you interface with people Warren faces with all day. They're wonderful people. And they win all the time instead of losing. Who doesn't like winning in good company? So if you can duplicate that, well, you've got a great future. I think we were a little lucky. And I don't know, I can't give you any luck.
Mr. Munger, I'm in the back here. We have a Chinese platform that focuses on writing content on people trying to invest out of China. And China will become the largest pool of investable capital in the world. Just by nature, it will be the largest economy in the world with a 30% savings rate. So they haven't been able to invest because of capital controls, but that day will come. And since they're at least half a century behind in understanding about investing, what would be the sort of first thing that you would tell a Chinese person who wants to invest in the U.S.? What should they do with their money when they're making their initial investment outside?
Well, you've made an assumption I don't follow. If I were a Chinese person of vast intellect and talent, discipline, all the good qualities, I would invest in China, not the United States. I think the fruit is hanging over there, and some of the companies are more entrenched. So I don't agree with your proposition. I think they have a tendency to think we were backward, therefore when we get rich, we should go over and invest in America. I think it's always a mistake to look for pie in the sky when you got a big piece of pie right in your lap. And so if I were at current prices, I think an intelligent person would do better investing in China.
Yes, Mr. Munger, right here. First of all, thank you for being a great teacher. I have 2 questions. Earlier you said everyone should spend 10 to 20% on some big ideas. What are 1 or 2 big ideas that you are talking about? And then second question is, you have admired...
I'm not going to tell you what to invest in.
No, I'm not saying the big ideas. I don't mean investment. You said specialize, but then spend time working on some big ideas.
Well, the big ideas, I think you should be intelligent in improving yourself. And you're way better to take on a really big, important idea that comes up all the time than some little tiny idea you may not face. So I always tried to grab the big ideas in every discipline. And because why piddle around with the little ones and ignore the big ones? So just all the big ideas in every discipline are just very, very, very useful. And frequently, the problem in front of you is solvable if you reach outside the discipline you're in, and the idea is just over the fence. But if you're trained to stay within the fence, you won't find it. And I've done that so much in my life, it's almost embarrassing. And it makes me seem arrogant, because I will frequently reach into the other fellow's discipline and come up with an idea that he misses. And when I was young, that caused me terrible problems. People hated me. And I probably shouldn't have been as brash as I was. And I probably shouldn't be as brash as I am now. I haven't completed my self-improvement process. But it's so much fun to get the right idea a little outside your own profession. And so if you're capable of doing it, by all means learn to do it. Even if you want to just learn it defensively. I do not observe professional boundaries. My doctor constantly writes, PSA test, prostate-specific antigen. I just cross it out. And he says, what the hell are you doing? Why are you doing this? And I said, well, I don't want to give you an opportunity to do something dumb. He says, if I've got an unfixable cancer that's going fast in my prostate, I'd like to find out 3 months in the future, not right now. And if I've got one that's growing slowly, I don't want to encourage some doctor to do something dumb and intervene with it. So I said, I just cross it out. Now, most people are not crossing out their doctor's prescriptions. But I think I know better. I don't know better about the complex treatments and so forth, but I know it's unwise for me to have a PSA test. So I cross it out. I'm always doing that kind of thing. And I recommend it to you when you get my age. Just don't cross out that PSA test. Now, the women, I can't help.
Thank you for sharing your time with us. And thanks for indulging our questions. I want you to imagine you have the opportunity to invest with a couple money managers that you really like, and they offer you a couple different ways to invest in their strategy. So one way is through a limited partnership that would flow through the taxes, and the other way is through a corporation that would pay tax on the gains and the dividends. So basically, the corporation would serve no other function, though, other than paying taxes. So I think you'd be crazy to say that those two ways of investing are equally desirable. So
You're certainly right about that. It's plumb crazy, and it's exactly the way people who buy Berkshire are investing.
Yeah, so my
Both
question
are
is,
correct.
how
It's
would
plumb
you...
crazy to have a big common stock portfolio in a corporation and pay taxes compared to investing in a partnership that doesn't. And that's just the way the Berkshire shareholders have invested. And they have made whatever it is, 25% a year since we were there. But you're right. It's not the logical way to do it.
So my question is, if you had to decide to invest in pool A or pool B, how would you decide on what method would you use to figure out what discount would make you indifferent to whether you invest through the corporate tax-paying structure?
I think it is totally asinine to invest in a portfolio of common stocks through a corporation taxed under the Internal Revenue Code under subchapter C or something. Totally asinine. And at Berkshire, the public securities keep going down and down as a percentage of the total value, so it doesn't matter. We're getting to be sort of a normal corporation. But I don't think anybody in his right mind should invest through a corporation in a puddle of securities. The tax disadvantage is so horrible. So I wouldn't even consider it. In other words, and I regard it as a minor miracle that we were able to get where we did. So of course you'd invest in a partnership.
So, but anyone who invests in Berkshire has to decide what discount to put on a pool of securities that has a future tax lien on the gains. So just, do you have any mental model for...
Yeah, my model is to avoid it. We don't want to invest in a pool of securities through somebody else's corporation. You're totally right. But you already knew, by the way.
Mr. Munger, are you right? It is Sandra from China, and I wonder what's your new findings of China, which you see business opportunities or just think different? Because I remember you once said like there was a Chinese woman post a video online and got 200 million viewers, and you think it's a new power of a new media. And also the second question is, after US election, the hedge fund manager Ray Dalio said the new administration could unleash the animal spirit, which could lead to a better US economy. Do you buy the theory? Thank you.
Well, I'm not sure I understood that completely, but I'll do my best. What I like about China is they have some companies that are very strong and still selling at low prices. And the Chinese are formidable workers, and they make wonderful employees, and there's just a lot of strength in that system. And the Chinese government, it really tries to help its businesses. It does not behave like the government of India, which I don't think runs its country right at all. And so that's what I like about China. And of course, I have to admire taking 1.5 billion people in a state of poverty up that fast. That was never done in the history of the world. And I admire, you go to China, all those bullet trains that go right to the heart of the city and all that. What they've done is just an incredible achievement. And they've done it not by borrowing money from Europe or the way we did when we came up. They have taken a poor nation with a lot of poverty, and what they did is save half their income when they were poor and drive their nation way up with a lot of deferred gratification. So it was unbelievably admirable and unbelievably effective. So I admire that part of the Chinese picture. Now, the Chinese have one problem. The problem with the Chinese people is they like to gamble. And they actually believe in luck. Now that is stupid. You don't want to believe in his luck, you want to believe in odds. And China, there's some reason in the culture, too many people believe in luck and gamble. And that's a national defect.
Hi. My name's Alex Manful. Back straight back there. I work with Johnny Burthen in New York. I was curious if the world changes a lot during a lifetime. By the time I'm closer to your age, what do you think will not change about what makes a good, successful business?
What will not change is it won't be that damn easy. There'll be lots of people will die that you love. You'll have close breaks where it goes against you. There's a lot of trouble that's sure to come. And at the end, you'll know that it's all over, and that's the game. It's a very funny game when you know when you start you have to lose. See, a dog doesn't have to do that. We know from the start we can't win. Somebody, Wag, said that the law of thermodynamics ought to be restated. You can't win, you must lose, and you can't get out of the game. And so we all face this ultimate difficulty. But once you've accepted the limitations, you've got the problem how to get through your allotted span reasonably well. And I don't think that's that hard to figure out. Because if you do pretty well, considering what you started with and so forth, and you stand at the end and you've done creditably, and you've helped other people when they needed help because you had the capacity and intelligence to do it, and so on, set a reasonable example, it's a pretty good thing to do, and it's quite interesting. And the difficulties make it interesting. And something else happens that is really weird. We were talking about, in our directors meeting, preceded this meeting, you always get glitches to something as complicated as a new software program going into a big new area. And you suddenly have reverses and troubles and you're scrambling. And what I said is that I noticed in a long lifetime that the people who really love you are the people where you scramble together with difficulty and you jointly gotten through. And at the end, those people love you more than somebody who's just shared an uneven prosperity through the whole thing. So this adversity that seems so awful when you're scrambling through it actually is the sinew of your success, your affection, every other damn thing. And if you didn't have the adversity, you wouldn't have the bonds, which are so useful in life, that are going to come from handling the adversity well. The idea that life is a series of adversities and each one is an opportunity to behave well instead of badly is a very, very good idea. And I certainly recommend it to everybody in the room. And it works so well in old age because you get so many adversities you can't fix. So you better have some technique for welcoming those adversities. Yeah.
Hi, Charlie. My name is Share, right over here. You touched on how one should situate themselves in a way where they can deal with a 50% downturn in their portfolio. For an investor forming a partnership in today's competitive market, focus on concentrating in those few and rare wonderful opportunities. Do you believe that the 0.625 high watermark fee structure that the Buffett partnership popularized is the fairest structure for both limited partners and the manager themselves? And could you also touch upon what fee structure you employed during your partnership? Thank you.
Well, I did copy the Buffett formula more or less, and I do think it's fair, and I think it's still fair. And looking at Monique, she still uses it. You know, I think it is fair, and I wish it was more common. I basically don't like it, the business of scraping it off the top. If you're advising other people, you ought to be pretty rich pretty soon. Why would I take a lot of advice from somebody who couldn't himself get pretty rich pretty soon? And if you're pretty rich, why shouldn't you put your money alongside your investors and go up and down with them? And if it's a bad stretch, why should you scrape money off the top when they're going down and up? So I like the Buffett system. And I think but it's like so many things I like, it's not spreading very much. My net influence in the world, even Warren's, has been pretty small. Imagine how much copying we have on our executive compensation methods. It's about 3 examples. Yes, I think it's a fine system.
Hello. You spoke earlier about natural gas and the shipping of natural gas and that activity, but
yeah, I wouldn't do any. If I were running the world as a benign despot, I wouldn't be shipping any natural gas out of the United States.
So to tap into that, you've been active in 2 states that are big into agriculture, Nebraska and California, produce. What are your thoughts on the ag industry, specifically tied to subsidies? All that stuff, I would think you'd agree, is outdated and maybe is threatening water resources, maybe just inefficient and based on past models. What's your thought on ag and
well, the interesting thing about agriculture is what's happened in my lifetime, which is for productivity of an acre of land has gone up about 300%. And if it weren't for that, there'd be a lot of starvation on Earth. So the ag system is one of the most interesting things that has happened in the last 60 or 70 years. And we literally tripled the yield from an acre of land. And we did it all over the world, you know, and there was just a few people who did it, the Rockefellers, Borlaug, and so forth. And it was one of the most remarkable things in the whole history of the earth. And we need another doubling, and we're probably going to get it. And it's absolutely incredible how well we've done, and it's amazing how efficient our farmers are. We don't have much socialization in farming. We got a bunch of people who own the farms and manage them themselves. There's not much waste and stupidity in farming. Now, people complain that we're using up the topsoil, which I think we are. And I think that's way more of a mistake. I would fix that if I were a benign despot. But leaving aside the way we're using the topsoil up too fast, I think farming is one of the glories of civilization. So I think it's been wonderful what's happened in farming. Now, in terms of subsidies, it matters to the farmers whether they get those subsidies. And there's no question about the fact we've protected our farmers with subsidies, and that the farmers we're protecting are getting richer and richer because the farms are owned by fewer and fewer people, own more and more acres per person. So it's very peculiar that we're subsidizing a bunch of people who are already filthy rich to use up our topsoil a little faster and create stuff that we turn into ethanol, which is one of the stupidest ideas the world has ever. I'm a specialist in stupid ideas, but I would say turning corn into gasoline is about as stupid an idea. I would almost rather jump out of a 20-story building and think I could fly than turn ethanol, corn into motor fuel. It's really stupid. And yet that's what our politics does. And I've got no cure for the stupidity of politics. And if I did, the world would be quite different. But I think that's pretty minor, whether we have subsidies or not. The main thing that's happening that has enabled the present population of the world to stay alive is this agricultural revolution and this very good management of our farmlands and the improving agricultural standards in the rest of the world. And it's gone on quietly because they haven't even noticed it hardly. How many of you are just deeply aware of the fact that grain per acre is going up by 300 or 400%? That's a huge stunt. And by the way, if you take those miracle seeds and don't use hydrocarbons, the yields are lousy. We're feeding ourselves because we know how to turn oil into food. That's one of the reasons I want to hold on to the oil. Something that can be turned into food is quite basic. And so I don't mind conserving it, the oil, instead of producing every last drop as fast as one can. And it's odd that my idea hasn't spread to more other people. I may have 3 or 4 people who agree with me in this room, but you're a bunch of admirers. And the rest of the world, I'm all alone.
Hello, Charlie. Thank you for mentoring us. My question is this. You talked about emotions, you talked about discipline, and you talked about facing adversity. Can you flesh out more about the spiritual side of this? About what do you deal with? How do you deal with it to pass out adversity or deal with the struggles and ultimately life? Yeah.
Well, just because you don't have a specific theology, and I don't, when I was a little kid and my grandfather sent me to Bible school and they told me there was a talking snake in the Garden of Eden. I was very young, but I didn't believe him. And I haven't changed. But that doesn't mean I am not spiritual. I just sort of, I don't need a talking snake to make me behave well. And I would say that the idea that came down to me, and partly through my family, was that rationality is a moral duty. If you're capable of being reasonable, it's a moral failure to be unreasonable when you have a capacity to be reasonable. I think that's a hair shirt that we should all take on, even if we're pretty stupid, because it's good to be less stupid. And so I think rationality is a moral duty, and that we all have a duty to get better. And of course, we also have to adjust to the other people that we're going through our journey with. I think it would be crazy not to have a social safety net when you're rich and successful as we are. Now, I don't think it has to be as dumb as the one we have, but of course we need a solid social safety net. And that's a moral idea, so I'm all for morality, without the talking snakes. Yeah.
Mr. Munger? We're going to take 2 or 3 more questions, and then I think Charlie will be here immediately after. And we have copies of 2 of Charlie's writings. I think we made 400 copies, and they will be available on the way out. And also you probably...
By the way, I was cleaning out my office because we're moving, and I just found these damn things. My God, all those people are coming in from India and China. I'll give them my old things. I hadn't even read them in years and years, so I'm just visiting some of my past screeds.
Mr. Munger? And also you probably noticed this is being recorded by CNBC, and I don't know when they plan on making it available. Maybe the representative there can tell us.
Yeah, it'll probably be soundbites that air on CNBC, and then there's a certain CNBC Pro on that. You can sign up for that.
Yeah, rather welcome.
Mr. Munger? Berkshire is the largest shareholder of Phillips 66, and Phillips 66 owns general partner and limited partner stakes in 2 different MLPs. I was wondering what your thoughts are on the master limited partnership structure in industry. And also, I was wondering if you had any preliminary thoughts on the proposed border adjustment tax.
Well, we don't, let me take the last question first. We do not know what the border adjustment tax is. I don't think the people who are proposing it know what it is. And I don't think Trump and the Republicans in Congress have agreed on anything. So I think we're just talking about. But do I think that some deep revision of the tax system might be a very good idea? The answer is yes. Do I think we should rely on consumption tax more? The answer is yes. Do I really care if somebody piles up a lot of money and leaves it to some foundation? That's not my idea of a big evil. And if the people want to live high in their private airplanes and their $300 dinner checks, I'm all for taxing the people who are living high. But so I like the idea of bigger consumption taxes, and I think there's a lot to be said for a different kind of a tax structure.
Hi, Mr. Munger. You highlighted this idea of deferred gratification a lot today, and I just wanted to get your thoughts on what areas and aspects of life is it most valuable, and where should it not be applied, where should you enjoy things now versus where you should sort of grind away and invest in the future. Thanks.
Well, I don't think you should use up your body by being stupid in handling it, and I don't think you should be stupid in handling your money either. So, and I think there are a lot of things where the only way to win is to work a long time toward a goal that doesn't come easily. Imagine becoming a doctor. That is a long grind. All those night shifts in the hospital and so on and so on. It's deferred gratification, but it's a very honorable activity, being a doctor. And by and large, our doctors are very nice people, and they've been through a lot. So I tend to admire the life of a doctor more than I admire the life of a derivative trader. And I hope all you do too. And I think deferred gratification, the way our doctors behave, is a very good thing for all the rest of us.
Hello, Mr. Munger, this is Simran here. Thanks for your generosity. I had a very general question about circle of competence and science of hitting. How do you know its limit? And does it get redrawn from time to time? You think you know something and then you don't? Does it always expand or does it contract?
Well, of course, you know some things that aren't so. And of course, if you're dealing with a complex system, the rules of thumb that worked in the complex system in year 1 may not work in year 40. So in both cases, it's hard. The laws of physics you can count on, but the rules of thumb in a complex civilization changes as the civilization changes. And so you have to live with both kinds of uncertainty, and you have to work along with it. It's not a bad thing. It's interesting. We're all the same. Who would want to live in a state of sameness? You might as well be dead.
Thanks for coming out, folks.